Now we'll work on the eye movements and blinks and finish up this warm-up lesson. Let's work on the eye movement first. So how do the eyes move? Well, here's a few diagrams that's going to help us figure that out. I'll just bring up the first one. Okay, here illustrates someone throwing a football. And let's just say someone asked us to focus on the thrown football. Well, that's what we do. We target on that football as it's being thrown. Okay, but now let's look at another diagram. I'll minimize that and bring this one up. And here we see a similar situation, only this time there's no football. And let's just say now the person asked us to pretend to focus on a thrown football. Well, we try to do that, but our eyes would actually target on certain objects along the way. So that's how our eyes move. Go ahead and minimize this. And I also want to note that, remember how I said that we want to try to stay away from linear movements in our animation? Well, there are exceptions, and this is one of them. We want linear tangency in our eye movements, and this isn't always the case. Let's say our character was rolling his eyes, for example, then we would want a smooth tangency for that. So we just need to discern which tangency to use when animating the eyes. And we're also going to get some snappy movements, some snappy turns out of our eyes, some pretty quick turns. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I'll bring back the final result for this first warm-up lesson, and I'll start it back over and hit play. And notice the eyes are moving pretty quickly from target to target. Okay, so that's what we're going to work on, and we're also going to work on the subtlety of the eyes. Okay, so we'll stop that, and we'll break the eye movements down in passes. Okay, so we're going to do the extremes, then we'll do the moving holds where our eyes are focused, and we'll also get the spacing of when our character's eyes focus on a different target. Then we'll work on the subtlety, and after we'll switch our tangency from flat to linear to complete the eye movements. So we'll bring back our NURBS curves, and let's hit 6 on our keyboard so we can view the texture of the eyes. We'll select our eyes control, and we'll only be moving in the translate X and Y. So we'll make sure on frame 1 and key those. And let me also mention, or let me ask another question. What leads what? That's an important question we need to ask as animators. Okay, so for the eyes and for the head, what would lead what? Would the eyes lead the head, or would the head lead the eyes? Well, it all depends. Okay, let me bring up a few scenarios. Let's say that, for example, our character was talking to someone to his left. Okay, and let's say now the conversation was about over and he was walking away. In that case, his head would start to lead, and then his eyes would follow after, because his eyes would still be focused on the person he's talking to, but once he's done, then his eyes would then follow afterwards. But let me go ahead and flip that around. Let's say now our character heard a loud noise towards his right. Then his eyes would lead, and his head would follow after, okay, to find out what that loud noise was. But I'm just going to undo back those changes. So keeping that in mind, what we're going to do is actually have the eyes lead. Let's say our eyes are just focusing on certain targets, okay, just like what we explained before initially. So we're going to have our eyes lead. So let's work on that. We'll go to frame 14 just before our character's head is turned fully to his right. And we'll go into our translate manipulator, hit W. And now let's translate our character's eyes to his right. And we could also move them up a little bit. Okay, so that's our first extreme, or our second actually. Our first was on that first frame. Let's work on our third extreme. So we could go to frame 55 just before our character's head is turned to his left, and we'll bring the eyes over, and we can bring them down a little bit. And our last extreme, we'll have our character focus more on us. So let's go to frame 102 just before our character has turned his head to his right, and we'll have his eyes focus more on us like that. Now let's do a play blast to review our results. So we'll hide our NURBS curves, focus our character's head in, and we'll do a play blast. And I'm just going to pause the video. Here's the play blast. And we can see that our eyes are not looking right. We do have more tweaks to do, because now they're just floating along. They're not moving correctly at all. So let's go ahead and work on the tweaks. What we're going to do now is work on the moving hold pass. So we'll close this out. We're actually going to be using the middle mouse button technique for that. So let's select the eyes. And remember, this moving hold we're going to add, we're also going to get the spacing that we'll need for the eyes to snap to their next target. So that's what we're also going to work on. So let's go to frame 14, where our character is focused to his right first, and we'll middle mouse button click now on about frame 46, where we want the moving hold to end, and we'll go ahead and we'll key the translate X and Y. Alright, so now throughout this duration of time, our character is focused on a certain target, and then his eyes snap to his next target, just like what we want. So let's work on the next moving hold. We'll go to frame 55, where our character is now focused on a target to his left, and we can middle mouse button click now on about frame 94. So throughout this duration of time, we'll have his eyes locked and we'll hit key selected. Okay, and then we also have the snap that we want, where our character is now looking at us. And we won't have to worry about this last segment just yet. So now we can do another play blast and review the timing that we've just done. So we'll hit play, and I'll just pause the video, and here's the play blast. And now we can see the timing is much better on our eyes. We have much better spacing, okay, as well. So we can now stop this, and what we're going to do now is work on the subtlety of the eyes. So we'll select the eyes control, and let's see, let's add the subtlety on the last two eye turns. We're not going to add it on the first. And why is that? Well, we don't want any linear consistency in our animation. Okay, we want it so that there's some natural offset going on, just to add to, again, the believability for our animation. That's what we want to, one thing we want to aim for. We want our animation to look believable so our audience can relate. So we'll add the subtlety on our last two eye turns. So let's go to about frame 69. And on frame 69, we'll just key in the translate X and Y. And this is just so that the position that the eyes are in will be the same on frame 55. So we could have a moving hold from frame 55 to 69. Now let's work on the eye snap, or the subtlety of the eyes, which should be snappy movement. So we'll go to frame 73 now, and let's just move the eyes. Let's say the eyes move down some and more towards the character's right, like that. Okay, so when we scrub through, we can see we're getting some nice subtlety now from the eyes. And we could even add another subtlety. So on frame 73, let's go now and middle mouse button click on about frame 89, and we'll hit key selected. So now we can have the eyes having their moving hold throughout this amount of time. And we'll go to frame 94 now, and on frame 94, let's have the eyes move a little bit more. We'll change the pose slightly so we can have the eyes move up and more towards the left, like that. So if we scrub through, here's what we get. Okay, now let's add some subtlety towards the end of our animation. So let's middle mouse button click on about frame 107 after we've left mouse button clicked on frame 102. So make sure we're on that frame of 102, and we'll middle mouse button click on frame 107 so we can have the moving hold there. And now let's go to about frame 110, and on frame 110 what we can do is let's bring the eyes down some and more towards the left. Okay, and I also want to mention that we don't want to have too much movement going on. Okay, this is also where the simple is more principle comes in. Okay, so alright, so now we're getting some nice movement out of that, and we could even add another subtlety in the eyes. So let's go to frame 117, and we'll key the translate X and Y, and we'll go ahead now and go to frame 120, and we'll move the eyes up, and let's move them a little bit over to the right. Okay, now let's do another play blast to see what we've done. So we'll hide the NURBS curves, focus our character's head in, and do a play blast. And I'm just going to pause the video. Here's the play blast. So we'll examine it. And notice now we're getting some nice subtlety out of our eyes. It's not much, it's just right. Okay, so again, we don't want to add too much subtlety, because then that'll take away from the animation. Or the eyes will probably look too weird, or excuse me, will look weird if you add too much movement in there. But we added just enough where the animation will look believable, will look normal. Okay, so now we'll do our last step. So we'll stop this, close out the F check, and we'll bring back our NURBS curves. We'll select the eyes control, and now we need to change the tangency of our translate X and Y to linear. So we'll go to our perspective graph view, and we'll make sure that we're on our translate X and Y, and we are. Okay, so we can just select the eyes control so we can see both of them. And we'll select this icon to switch our tangency to linear. Now let's do another play blast and see if we can notice any change. So I'm going to Window, Play Blast, and I'm going to pause the video again. Here's the play blast. Okay, so the change is subtle, but we're still getting the proper movement out of the eyes. Okay, so there is a slight change, and we can even hit the period key on our number pad so we can zoom into the eyes. That'll allow us to zoom into our F check, and we can really notice the subtle changes just from doing the tangency switch from flat to linear. Okay, so that's the movement of the eyes, and what we're actually going to work in the next lesson, what we're going to work on in the next lesson is doing the blinks, and we'll finish up the warm-up lesson there.